she's presently coaching at Brock University, and she worked with the women's Olympic team as an assistant coach, and she was doing leadership work back at the time, and now she still does it. So I've been trying to reach her to get her to come on, and when hell comes on, I'm hoping to talk about that. But have you ever been involved in that kind of thing where you're working with young people and have to develop leadership or hone their nurture their skills?
I have. That's always been something that's been extremely important to me. And I think it was, again, going back to my father, who, you know, he and my mother, they raised a family of four. Like I say, my dad worked two two jobs for 31 years. He was in the service. He was actually in the Battle of the Bulge. The whole thing about leadership, he set some pretty interesting examples. And always going back, I was always fascinated by kind of what made players tick, if you will. And as young as when I was coaching Pee Wees, I would actually have them give me examples. I would have them write a paragraph or a page of who they thought was a leader and why. So they would actually pick, anything from sports figures to movie figures to people in their own lives. And for me, it's always boiled down to the formula I've always used is that a leader is, and again, this is assuming, you back when we had more nuclear families, I guess, and strong males being dads is I always likened a captain was like a good dad. I can remember that, my father made sure that we had shoes, we had clothes, we had food to eat. The food was on the table. He made sure everybody had their food before he ate. So I always likened a good captain as like a good dad. You're taking care of everyone else. Again, with the idea, again, that was our motto when I coached NCAA was one family, right? In other words, we're a family, and the captain, he was like the dad of the family. He made sure everybody else got what they needed, be it in the classroom, be it away from the ice, looked out for the boys when they went out together. And that if he approached it as a good father who was looking out for his family, that made for a good captain. And that, for me, always was a good formula. And we spent a lot of time working with our captains, trying to teach them those ideas and those ideals, uh, not preaching, more what do you think? Here's a situation. What would you do? How would you deal with it? Right? They would come to us with certain situations that come up. And my first response would always be, tell me what you think and what you're feeling about this. Because if I just give you answers, I'm not teaching you. So I think that is teaching leadership, teaching how to be a good captain, how to take care of others, and hopefully they'll do that through their lives as they move on.
How did you eventually end up picking them? Did you have a process, or was it sort of like just intuitive, or did you have a voting system and heard from different people and what they thought, including the players? Or
Yeah, well, the answer to that question is yes to all of those. I think for sure we did a voting. We did votes at the end of each season who would be the next year's captain coming up like that. But when we initially did it, it was intuitive and just it was observational. And it was for me, it was individuals who I thought had that potential in the recruiting process. Because when I first started the program, right, it was a brand new program. There was there wasn't anything. So there was no body of work for anyone to say, hey, you know what, here's a freshman or sophomore. We think they're really good. We think they could be a captain. So it was intuitive, and it was just watching them, how they operated, how they were around the team. and then beginning to probe if I saw someone who I thought had the potential, then I would start to talk to other players. I'd ask them sort of leading questions, I guess, about what do you think about this player and how are they in the room when you guys are out? Do they take care of you? Do you feel like this is someone you could talk to, someone you could go to if you had an issue and you could trust? Because trust is a big part, I think, about being a captain.
Now, I'm just not, I'm trying to just get into my mind, not having played and all. I'm trying to see did you get into that situation of where you're a leadership and going to head coach, sort of be the father of the family of the team. And when you did that, do you recall um, how you went about creating the captaincy and deciding who would it be initially, and how have you adapted that in the process? And would you give any advice to coaches on captain selection?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's you observe how those individuals treat others. To me, that's first and foremost, and not necessarily just amongst your team, right? Because we did a lot of different functions too. We were big on we did a lot of community service in that. So we saw how people, and there were people that would naturally do things like something as simple as you go into a classroom and you're going to clean desks, and there's paper towels and Windex sitting there. The guy who actually says, "Hey, fellas, why don't you three of you grab those and we'll do this side of the room and you guys do the other side of the room." I mean, there are things like that that organically just naturally happen. So I've always been very detail oriented, I feel. So I always look at those little things that those individuals did, that they did on their own. Um, so those were kind of the keys for me that would pique my curiosity of it, if you will. And then I would begin to ask those other questions, like I said, what other people thought of them. But I think what is important is you make sure that the captaincy is not a popularity contest, right? You don't want the guy who maybe buys everybody the first round, when they go out, or is necessarily the funniest person in the room. The person that is going to actually lead and that they can lean on, that's what you need to look at. So I think what happens all too often is, well, Johnny or Janie, they score 30 goals. That's going to be one of my captains. Well, they may not bring anything else to the table away from the rink. And the way a good captain leads is actually certainly on the ice and certainly in the room. But again, away from the room, I think is as important, if not much more important. And again, that sort of leads to your question of like, to what age, right? Because if you're 12 or 13, you're probably not going to be in that situation where you are away from the ice in a group, being able to lead and direct and kind of really be a mentor. And it's funny because interestingly, I have a habit. I take the seniors out for dinner or for lunch, I should say, when they're graduating. And I got two more left next year for my team, but this year there were 7 of them that graduated. And the one thing I noticed is when we did actually sit and we all got our food, the captain waited until everyone had their food before he actually began to eat. So that kind of made me feel good that he was really still, in that captain mode, even though at that point he's a senior, graduating. So I enjoyed that piece of that little lunch there. But yeah, I mean, again, the advice is it's not a popularity contest. They need to be someone who you can talk to and you can relate to, and who can send the message to the team And when there are issues on the team, if they need that support, they feel comfortable enough coming to you to get that information, that support, and you should guide them as opposed to telling them what to do. Otherwise, I think you kind of take away their power.
You know, you're talking about captain, and I'm thinking in the singular. And when we think of great hockey captains in the past, you know, some were quiet, soft spoken, demonstrated by example. And maybe Belleville was a good example in Canada for that. Others were maybe a little more vocal and set a physical example, like Mark Messier on the ice. But what I'm finding in minor hockey, and I'm talking at age levels at the U15 and above, there's almost a competition and related to the importance and ego of being a captain. And it really is a problem with some teams and organizations who are lobbying for their children of some of the parents to be captains. And there gets to be cliques, and I'm talking more of female teams here, a third year player versus the first year player, that kind of thing. And I'm sure at college, are captains always your seniors? And how do you avoid the mess of the conflict of people thinking they should be captain when they're not really natural leaders doing it for the right reason and the right way?
And I think there's two different things there. I'm gonna grab my coffee real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I do have an answer.